This is a podcast about our lived experience, which unfortunately includes infant death and subsequent mental health struggles. Please take good care of yourself and only listen if this content feels safe for you right now. We'll still be here when you're ready.
Hi, I'm Judith.
And I'm Alina. We both lost babies to SIDS in winter 2021.
In the throes of grief, I reached out to a stranger on the internet and our friendship was born.
In the years since, we've been working hard to survive, rebuild, and navigate the continual challenges that have come our way, including divorce,
Job loss,
dating while bereaved,
moving multiple times,
health scares,
pregnancy and parenting a living child,
starting new jobs, and so much more.
We are tired.
Happily ever after is out of the question for us, but this podcast documents our journeys to happier ever after because we believe life after loss is worth living.
So join us as we laugh, cry until we laugh.
Welcome to As Long As I'm Living podcast.
We're so glad you're here.
Judith, would you like to introduce our guest today?
We have a wonderful guest on the podcast today. Her name is Marnina. Marnina, why don't you introduce yourself and introduce your family however you feel is your family?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Marnina, and I had a fun infertility and loss journey. So I get, double whammy. I think, Alina, you've recently joined that club. So sorry that you're in that club with me. But I actually had my first son who's now 10 years old, and he was like a piece of cake. Like, I think I tried for 3 months and I was like, this is so hard. But of course that's ridiculous. And then after that, we tried for many years and did not go to plan. So we ended up doing IVF for a few cycles. And luckily, because it really is luck, just by the way, it really is. We had my daughter, Liel, who's just turned 4 years old. And after that, we thought, okay, well, we figured this out. We know what we're doing now. We just got to do IVF. So we did IVF again, like a year after that. And on the first shot, it took, which is very exciting. And that was my daughter, Michal, who was 40 weeks and 5 days when she was stillborn. And she was completely healthy and textbook pregnancy, third pregnancy. So, I'd never even had a miscarriage before. Everything was, again, textbook. And then it wasn't so textbook anymore. So that is my loss. And since then I have had another child. I have a son who's going to be 1 year old in a few weeks. So that's my family. And of course, my husband, Mayor, he comes along for the ride.
And I'll also add that Michal's death anniversary is coming up like really soon, right? It's like,
yeah,
it's really soon.
It's in 3 days.
Yeah. I was like, I know it's really soon.
Yeah.
So I'm sure it's heavy on your mind, of course, but I love that we have this space to talk about her.
Yeah, no, I do too.
Especially now, to remember her and honor her and talk about how she shaped your life. So Marnina is my friend in loss, but I feel like to give the fuller story, I'd like to share like how we met and what our friendship has looked like for you, for me. So I think to tell that story, we have to go back. You and I did not meet in loss. We've met before.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you tell the story how you remember it? Because I was really disassociated. I'm not sure I fully remember it much once you get to your loss. But okay, you tell the story how you remember it, and I'll tell you how I remember it.
So Judith and I met, 15 years ago. Oh God, that sounds weird to say.
Oh, really long time.
Ooh.
2009, 2010.
Yeah, God. Yeah, that's like almost 15 years ago. So we were in a post-high school program abroad. And, we were in a program with 100 other people. And I remember Judith she was actually very much like me. We're both very outgoing, both very bubbly, both had a ton of friends and did a lot of things. But there was just so many people in that environment that I feel like just the way that, the people that we were thrown together in a dorm with, we didn't end up connecting so much throughout the year. I remember I really liked Judith, and anytime we hung out, it was always fun. But just by, I think, virtue of the fact that there were so many people, we didn't end up, spending too much time together, even though we had a ton of overlapping friends. And again, I always really liked Judith. I thought she was the coolest.
I would say that I don't have a lot of memory. I don't remember much about our friendship. Yeah. I don't think
I mean, it's 15 years.
I don't know who you were. I thought you were great. I know that you were really close friends with your roommates.
Uh-huh.
And I know that that's all I really know. You were there.
Yeah, we were both there. And I think like, we were Facebook friends. So like, you popped up on my feed and I popped up on your feed and
Yeah.
we probably like saw each other's lives.
Do you know, we actually went to college together, I think.
Oh God.
I don't know if you know this, but you invited me to your wedding and I went.
I do remember that.
I don't know how I got so lucky to be on the invite.
Is that before the time when you actually met?
No, it was after that year that we were abroad. I got married the next year and I invited everybody I knew to this wedding.
Yeah. And I remember thinking, like, why am I invited? I didn't know why I was invited, but I was so happy to be included. And I had
Yeah.
such a great night. And actually, like, I think my first memory of you from, like, my first memory, I could be like, oh, I know Marnina, is from your wedding.
That's hilarious.
I just remember that night so vividly because I took a bus there, but there was no bus back. So to figure out how to get back. And I was with like all these people that we knew from that abroad program. And I just remember being at this wedding and you were so young. I mean, you got married. You were like one of the first people to get married.
Oh yeah. I was 20. And I probably invited you because you went to my college. That's probably why.
Yeah, I don't know, but I was so happy to be there. It was such a great experience. So I would say that's like an extent of our friendship.
Yeah.
In that you invited me to your wedding, I came, we knew each other vaguely. What I knew is that you got married like really, really fast. So you kind of like were off doing your own thing. And I knew that you had a baby really fast after that.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, and I'm kind of ashamed of this thought, but I remember just thinking like, wait, I don't understand because doesn't she want like a PhD? Like, how is she going to do all this? Like, I knew you were really smart and I knew you wanted a PhD and I knew you were studying psychology of some degree. And then you had this baby and I was like, oh my God, like like we were all in college building our, college stuff and you were like one step ahead. And I remember just being like, how is she going to do that?
Yeah.
But I'm dumb because she did. So anyway, I knew that you had a baby really, really young.
Yeah. I mean, I think I had him when I was like 22. So yeah, and he's 10 now. So yeah, it was fast.
That's like the extent of which I knew at all about your life.
Yeah. I think like my next memory of you is literally like 12 years later. I think I saw you had a baby. I saw Aiden. I saw he was born. And I was thinking to myself like, oh, she finally joined the club.
She didn't get a PhD, but I'm glad she got the baby.
Yeah, no, because I remember you had been married. I just remember thinking like, oh, they were married for a while. But to be honest, in my mind, I was like, oh, I'd been going through infertility. And in my mind, I was like, oh, I wonder if they've been joining the other club that I'm a part of and whether that's been part of their lives. But I just remember just seeing you peripherally, like,
And then when Aiden died, you one time told me that you were aware that Aiden died. So what do you remember about that?
So I actually remember you posting, it was this time of year, and you posted a picture of Aiden and you guys were like UPS people. And I remember seeing him. I'd be like, oh, that's so cute. And then I remember a couple days later, it felt like a couple days, I don't know, maybe a week later, a mutual friend of ours was at my house and she told me like, Judith's baby died. And I'm like, what? And I just like remember like where I was in like my house, like talking to her. And like I went on your Facebook page and I saw, and I was just like, so confused. I was like, died of SIDS? Well, she doesn't have any of the risk factors. Like it didn't like make any sense to me. I'm like, people don't die of that anymore. Like that doesn't happen anymore. We know back to sleep and we know no smoking. And like, I did not know anyone that had ever lost a child to SIDS, in our generation. And I just remember thinking like, oh my God, like, I wish I could like reach out. I wish I could do something. And going back and forth, like, oh, me and Judith, we're not really friends. She doesn't want to hear from some random person from, school 15 years ago. I probably like donated to one of those things that your friends, put out, but I don't even think I sent you a message. But I did think about you a lot over that year. I thought about Aiden a lot over that year. And I was like, oh, I wish I could reach out. I wish I could do something, but nothing. And then the next thing I remember after Michal died was, obviously you get like a million messages from a lot of people. And in like the haze of my brain, like I saw Judith had reached out to me. And I was just like, oh, right. Like Judith knows loss. But, in the beginning of grief, I think you're very focused on differences. And I think I was like, oh, unless someone has had the exact same experience than me, they really aren't going to understand.
They couldn't possibly understand.
They couldn't possibly understand my experience, And so I was like, oh, that's nice of Judith to reach out. And I figured like that would be that. But Judith, she keeps reaching out.
Boy, does she.
Such aggressive.
Oh yeah. She reached out like a lot. And I was just like, this is really nice. I don't really, have much to answer, but like she just kept reaching out. And then you stopped reaching out, which I didn't actually necessarily notice, but then you reached out to tell me, well, I want to tell you before you find out on my Facebook that, I just had a baby. So like, I'm sorry. I was like AWOL for a few days there. And I remember being like, oh, like she had a baby. So now she's going to be too busy for me. Little do I know that's not how Judith works either.
No, it is not.
Well, I was gonna say that I remember that when I found out, because this is what I'll say. You are the first person that I knew from my own world, not the lost world, that had a loss. And I think that's what's really kind of unique. That I know we both know a lot of people, but I actually knew Marnina personally, and she had a loss 1 year after my loss.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't like a lost friend. I mean, it became that, but it wasn't like I met her with the context of loss. And it's not like our friendship was based in loss. I mean, our friendship, our acquaintanceship was just based on circumstance, not based on loss. And I remember I was 38 weeks pregnant, and I was like, I found out that you had a stillbirth, and I saw it, and I remember my stomach like dropped. And it dropped it dropped because I was pregnant. I was 38 weeks pregnant with a baby girl also. But then I had this feeling of dread, which I think, and I wonder if other people can really relate to, which is like, oh my God, like this happens, like this happens to more people I know. Oh my, it felt so common. It felt like the circles were closing in on me.
Okay. Today we're honoring sweet little Harper in her memory, and today's episode is sponsored by her family, by her parents. Harper lived for 8 days, and for the entire 8 days that she was in this world, her parents sang "You Are My Sunshine" to her nonstop, and that connection to light and warmth is something that always reminds them of Harper.
You know
Harper's
what's so
mom-
funny? That song sounds like it's like really happy, but it's actually like
It's
such a
actually really
great
sad.
song for a baby that
I
died.
know. Well,
It
this
really
next part I
is.
love so much because it says that Harper's mom
Erin.
says that the garden at her cemetery is filled with marigolds, which are Harper's birth flower. And I recently I just got a necklace with all my children's birth flowers, so I am super into birth flowers. And they often see butterflies, ladybugs, and rainbows,
Aw,
which remind them of Harper and feel like little signs.
that's so sweet. So Harper has a big sister, Riley, who was so excited to be a big sister, acted way beyond her 3 years when she met Harper in the hospital. Riley is still a protector and advocate for her baby sister, makes sure they're included in everything they do, and she loves to take care of Harper's garden with the aforementioned marigolds. Her mom, Erin, shared that Riley is always talking about how silly Harper is, which is a sweet reminder that Harper is very much a part of their lives. Harper's birthday is actually today, her second birthday today, October 7th. She lived for 8 days in the NICU. She passed away on October 15th, 2022. And they've since welcomed little sister Bryn into the mix. I love the name Bryn. I've always loved the name Bryn. Obviously, I can't name a baby Bryn because I have a Quinn, even though he's dead, but I love that name. Through all of that, Erin shares that Harper's presence is felt every day. She's missed deeply by her family. It is really shocking to just think about how one day she was here and then one day she wasn't. But we really appreciate, Erin, you bringing Harper to us and letting us celebrate her second birthday with you all. And if I see a marigold or a butterfly or a rainbow today, I will think
We'll
of
be
baby
thinking of you,
Harper.
Harper. Happy birthday, Harper.
Happy birthday.
felt like sick to my stomach because I knew exactly what you were going to go through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh my God, another person. And I think I didn't say anything for the first few days. And I think it's because I just felt so yucky about it. It wasn't like what Marnina was saying, where she was like, what am I going to say? I knew exactly what I would have to say. And I just knew exactly how bad it was going to be. And then I also felt this like, but I'm pregnant now. Like, am I even the right person to say anything? And I just felt like, oh my God, it almost felt like, so it's like when you know what someone's going through and you know how bad it is, it's like way more difficult than when you don't know. It's a lot, you know exactly how horrific it's going to be. And so I just didn't say anything. And I guess the reason I'm saying this now is because I feel like what I've learned through what Marnina's saying, what I'm saying now is that there's always value in reaching out. Always value in reaching out. Whether you're worried you're going to trigger the person, whether you don't know what to say at all, whether you're like, we're barely acquaintances, we don't know anything. First of all, Minnie and I would have said that if you would have reached out, I wouldn't remember. so I wouldn't have remembered, but because I don't remember all the people who reached out at that time. But I think as a way to honor Michal, there's value in reaching out. Like, it's not necessarily about you and it's not necessarily about me. It's about her life mattering.
Mm-hmm.
So like I always, at this point, I always reach out. The question is like, do I have enough to give?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, Marnina, you're a unique case because you are the first person that I was able to give to after I'd been taking for so long.
Really?
Yeah. 150%. It was just about 1 year. And I had been taking so much from like the people who had experienced loss before me or the people who were in it with me. Like, I don't really consider that giving or taking. I consider that like kind of a net neutral.
Yeah. Judith and I were very much like peers and like
Right.
in the same class and like moving through it together and in even exchange.
But the ability to hold someone's loss with them, the ability to check on them. I mean, you were the first person that I had the space to give in that way to. And it has been such a healing experience for me. And I remember when the first person I connected to who had a loss, her loss was 8 years before. And I remember she would ask me something about my day. And I'd be like, well, Daniela, what about your day? How was your day? Like, try to ask back. And she once said to me, she's like, that's not how this goes. Like, she was like, my day doesn't matter. Like, don't worry about my life. Don't worry about my kids. Don't worry about my anything. Like this, I am just sitting here with you. And over time, that dynamic shifts. You know, you have more capacity to hold, and
Right.
we can relate on a different level about whatever life circumstances are throwing my way. But in the beginning,
Yeah.
I just exist to help hold and to just be there as a person. So it's a very different relationship than I would say my relationship with Alina, where we were like, we didn't have any guidance. We were both in the dark. So I guess, did you feel that? How did you perceive it? And now that you're 2 years out, how do you feel like you've done that for anyone? And like, how is that experience going from receiving to giving? If that was even your experience.
I would say that I'm kind of shocked that I was the first person. I didn't actually know that you had kind of mentored in a way along this journey, because from my perspective, you always knew what to say. You always said the right thing. You always said the right thing. Like, I can't remember a time, especially early on, where like I was triggered or where like, it just felt like you were so good in that role of like guide, you were my guide. But really, like, it felt in those early days, especially like you're saying, like it was much more like you just holding space and you kind of being like a canvas, and just like, I think the thing that you did that no one else did early on is that you just kept checking in, and that like you never just disappeared. Like, you checked in every couple days, and then maybe it was like every week, and like over time, obviously it shifted a lot. And our dynamic has changed too, right? I think it's much more like, we have conversations now. It's not just, I'd say we're very good friends.
Now we're like real friends.
Yeah, now we're real friends, not just acquaintances from 15 years ago. But I definitely, in those early days, it felt like easy for me to kind of go into a hole and disappear and not answer anyone. But I couldn't do that with Judith, because she kind of like kept showing up and kept asking. And she wouldn't just be like, hope you're okay, thinking about you. And like, it would be like, how's today? How's this hour been?
Yeah.
It was very practical. Um, and I think a lot of the way that you kind of guided me, especially in those early days, like I certainly have kind of taken that with what I think of as like your grandchildren.
Well, I know you one time said to me, you said, "I'm the checker." And I was like, "I don't really know what that means," but you were like, "I'm the one checking on them." And I was like, "Oh, okay." Like, I think I was probably like a year or so after your loss, or maybe it was even sooner. You're like, "Oh, I'm the checker in that relationship." Like,
Yeah.
well, I know that you have taken other women under your wing. I don't know anything about them, like, or how that felt like for you, but I am curious. Like, talk to me about that friendship and how it differed or how it felt the same or
So I think like similar to like what you were describing, like about how it felt like you were the taker. So in my mind, like in those early months, it felt like I was like being dragged along and I was like at the end of this rope, holding on for dear life. And like the women that had come before me on this journey were just like dragging me along, like making sure I didn't like drown at the bottom of the ocean. Like they were just like keeping me afloat in the ridiculous waves, trying to get to that rock that I know you guys talk about. And then all of a sudden, like a few months later, I don't know, 5, 6 months later, I like look up and I'm like, oh, there's someone tugging behind me. Like it felt like, oh, there's this person right behind me and I feel like I can pull her a little bit. Now I can't do it by myself. Like I need the people in front of me to keep pulling me. But like there was definitely a time in those kind of mid early days where I feel like you were the one checking on me and I was like, oh, I can actually check on the girl behind me and see how she's doing. Um, and so there's been, I'd probably say like 2 or 3 people, probably like mostly 2 people. And like I will say a lot of the things that I do with them, like the checking in with them and the kinds of questions and the kind of conversations that we have, a lot of them are because I kind of saw how you related with me.
which, by the way, I only got from this woman. She just kept showing up. Exactly. She
Yeah.
just kept checking on me. And one thing that she did for me, and I'm just curious if this experience was for you, is that I could not imagine living like after Aiden died. And here was this person who was 8 years out, which felt, which is a long time, who like lived a happy life, who had other problems. And just knowing her and like just knowing that she had other problems and just knowing she had alive children subsequently, just knowing that she survived, I feel like to me that was tugging on the rope too, pulling me because I was like, oh, it's survivable. Without her, I don't know if I would have known that it was survivable.
Yeah, I think there's always someone ahead of you on that rope.
Yeah.
But I will say, I think like it does have to be the right kind of match. There certainly have been people that have like tried to be in the shoes that you were in, Judith, especially, there's a lot of support groups and I was certainly involved in them. And, I did have like a case manager, and they were kind of like what you're describing, like years out and, not in the trenches anymore and had other kids. And for me, it did not work. I did not feel like I wanted someone that was so far out and like living a happy life anymore. Like I wanted someone that was
having a horrible life. And she's so lucky she wandered on me because it was so shitty.
No, I just wanted someone that like, had that closeness to their loss, like you were still so close with Aiden.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And like he was still in every single breath and every single moment of your time. And I felt like, with this other individual, like obviously she was a case manager because she was, trying to, have his legacy live on in this way. But for me, it just felt like he wasn't every single breath. And I think that could be something that just happens over time. But for me, it wasn't the right fit for someone that I felt like could give me support.
Yeah. I am just so moved by the way you guys are describing this because it is so true, right? Like people have been losing babies since babies have been being born.
Yeah.
And it is hard to learn how to live without them. It really is. And so just having someone who's even just that little bit further ahead, I think probably helped you, Marnina, gain enough strength fast enough that you were able to, even 6 months out, feel like you had something to give. Like it's it's a beautiful web of really sad sad grieving parents. I mean, I go to the cemetery near my house and I see like parents buried next to their like dead babies and I'm like I just feel like this connection to, Mary from 1777 or whatever. Like I'm like, "Oh, Mary, like I'm thinking about, your son."
Yeah.
Like I'm thinking about him and it's just like it's really special and I know something Dr. Denise talked about a lot was that we talk a lot about bearing witness to things and how it's really important to have somebody witnessing your grief. But I think there's a really unique thing that comes, and she calls it bearing witness. So, like, yes, we can bear witness to things, but when someone is literally in it with you, that is like far and away more helpful than someone who's just, watching, although the watching is also good and witnessing it is excellent. But I feel like what you're talking about is Judith was really in it with you
Yeah,
and just ahead enough that you had like a little bit of a blueprint.
exactly.
Well, another thing that Marnina's friendship I find has been so like healing and beautiful and like good for me is that Marnina grew up in a similar like religious background that I did. And all of my other lost parent friends really are not religious at all or are not even of my faith. And Marnina, you have not lost your faith. And the way you speak about your faith in such like a strong conviction without like any like wavering at all, I have always found like to be really comforting
Mm-hmm.
because for me, it's been so shaky and I've wavered so much and I've lost so much of my faith. Like to see somebody who's held on to it, it's been like really it just feels good. And the way you speak about it, because like you'll be like, oh, I spoke to this rabbi, and I'll be like, Marnina, you're speaking to rabbis, like
Judith, you just spoke to a rabbi the other day.
I know, but my rabbi doesn't really count. My rabbi, he doesn't count. Marnina's rabbis are like rabbi, and she like has to me like there's something so comforting in that because I think it's easy to lose your faith and loss, and I think it's a lot harder to maintain your faith and loss. And so, like watching you and seeing that you have not wavered 1 minute has been like really, I think, special, but also like good for me to see,
Mm-hmm.
to remember, to like, it helps me kind of connect back
Mm-hmm.
to a time when things were a little simpler in my faith journey.
I definitely think that, I mean, all of these things are so normal. Holding on to faith more closely, veering away from your faith, going back and forth between the two, like that's all so normal. I think when you're going through this ridiculous kind of loss that's completely against.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Marnina, I want to ask you a question because I think we have other people that we met since the loss that became friends because they lost children. And I want to know from you, and I guess Judith too, I want to ask you too, like, how did it feel different having that shared history of knowing each other before? Because I can imagine there's something really special about having the before and after friendship, even if, as you guys described, it was not super close before. I'm just curious how that feels for both of you, because it sounds like each of you has made well, I know Judith, you have, but made other friends that are just lost parent friends.
I mean, for me, I think it was the reason probably why we connected in the first place. I think Judith wouldn't have approached me if I was just some like random person she didn't really know. So I think it's
I
just,
don't know, she might have.
she might have. I don't know if she would have shown up like that.
I was like, probably would have, but okay.
You mean I mean, she literally traveled out of state to go stay with me at a cabin with no internet or cell service for an entire weekend when we did not know each other.
That's true.
Maybe it would have been less receptive. Maybe it would have been like less comfortable.
Sure.
I think we would never have crossed paths. So I think like
Possibly true.
it was meant to be that we would have known each other in the past, because or else like we don't live in the same area, like we don't run in the same circles. Like it never would have, you never would have been that person for me. And so I think, again, part of it is just luck or whatever you want to call it. But I do think, again, what Judith was saying, it's more that that shared history that we have, the people that we know. And so like when we tell each other stories about our friends, like we're like, oh, this person,
she knows them. That's actually, I find really helpful. Like the people that are the biggest trigger in your life, I actually know. And like I'm friends with them, or who I'm talking about. And there's something so satisfying about complaining about someone and the person knowing them. They're not like this abstract person. It's like, oh my God, she is annoying. And I can imagine her being really insensitive.
Yeah. Or like, there was like a loss in the community last year, and like both Judith and I, like, peripherally, I mean, Judith less peripherally, more, knew, just like there's a lot more overlapping of like really being in each other's worlds. So I think, that part has been helpful.
that part's been really helpful for me. And I'll say there's also something where I felt like I lost so much of myself in the process of losing Aiden. I felt like I was a shell of myself. And I feel like for Marnina, when I hear her being like, well, of course Judith is the same. Like I'm not the same person, but like, the same essence of who I am. It's so validating to be like, oh, you still see me even in this ruined,
Mhm.
shattered, dark hell. You still see the me that I was.
Yeah.
That was really comforting and felt that continue. It feels good to see like, oh, she recognizes me. And I don't think you can recognize someone unless you knew them before.
Yeah, I have had that experience, not with people who've lost children, but a couple of people from I was friends with from high school, or not even really friends. Some of them were acquaintances that reached out to me um after Quinn died, and I remember feeling very comforted by the knowledge that people knew me and knew who I was, and they still saw me as the person I was before, because I just felt like a shell of myself. And I'm like imagining a world where one of those people intersected with someone who also lost a child. And like, I can just like, it would like blow my mind with how incredible that would have been. I hope I never have the opportunity to be this person, because that means somebody that I know loses a child. But if I do, it is special.
Well, there's also, I think, because we kind of grew up in this like minority of minorities, I'll say that there are certain traditions that she can check on me because she knows what they are or what they look like or what they feel like or what they sound like in a way that other people necessarily
Mhm.
can't. Like I remember when Michal first died, I got her a candlestick for you to light um on Friday nights. And that's
I light it every week.
and someone did that for me, someone who lost a child like 20 years before I'd done that for me. But it felt so good to be able to like see how that could bring comfort. And I could only do that because we kind of exist in the same little world, I can't do that for Alina. I mean, I can send her a candle, but it's not the same meaning. Or for Marnita to know what I'm referring to when I say that I'm, alone in Yisker and it's hard. There's that cultural nuances I think are helpful. And I think there's a safety in knowing this person and knowing that they speak your language and there's not a judgment. And I'll say like another thing that I find really helpful is like my sister lives near Marnina, and every time I go to my sister's house, we've spoken about my sister's house. Like there's some triggers for me there, and to know that I can go to Marnina's house and it's only like 5 minutes away because she lives in the same kind of pocket. They all kind of live near each other. Like I have a safe place to go to when I'm in town, a place that's like where I feel like my grief is seen and recognized. And even if we're not talking about me, even if I'm just, spending time with Marnina's new baby or whatever I'm doing, it's a safe place. There's a safe place for me near my sister's house, which can be a difficult place for me. So, I don't, that is only because we're kind of in the same little world. I I want to ask about how if you have found meaning. I want to kind of have a conversation. I don't know if I just want to ask, but I want to have a conversation about like what what is the value that being able to be a checker or being the one, like what has that given to you? Because I can say for me, like I said, it was
Yeah.
a healing experience, but like I want to kind of piece apart like what about it is healing.
Yeah. I think part of it, when you realize that you take a step back and you're like, wow, I'm actually able to give, that kind of marks a change in your grief process. That shows that, like, okay, I'm not in the depths. I might be pretty close to the depths, but I'm not in the depths anymore. Um, to the, that I have the capacity, at least today, to reach out and to be the checker for someone. And I don't think you can do that every day. I don't think anyone can always be the checker. But the fact that there are some days that you could be the checker, where it's like, okay, well, I'm taking note of that. Because until that moment where I checked on that person for the first time, I didn't even know I had it in me to ever do that again. And I'm a psychologist.
Yeah.
I was like, I'll never be able to do that.
That is how it feels, though.
And then like I also like imagine like maybe this happened for you, but like when you watch someone else kind of go through the stages and you can kind of almost like relive your own grief process and seeing how they transform, you're like, oh, I did that too. And like it's kind of healing to watch that process take place.
Yeah. I was actually just talking in therapy recently about how I was dissociated for like a significant portion of the first year of grief, which I think everybody is. But I think there's something, what witnessing someone else go through it up close helps me process what I also went through, because obviously I'm processing his loss every day of my life. But like even just that first year without him, like setting aside his actual loss, like the things that happened and the things you experienced, your first panic attack, like all this stuff, all of that is a trauma in and of itself that is worth processing. And like being able to witness someone else going through that is a way for you to kind of open the door and, and incorporate all of the things that you experienced into, into your life and come to terms with the fact that it all happened because you kind of forget.
And the ability, it like normalizes it. It normalizes it.
Yes.
Because when you're in it, you think you're the only person. You think like you're like you're crazy. But then when you see like, oh, like everybody who's been through this, like struggles with what to do with their clothes, or whatever, you're like, oh, like that's not as scary as it felt at the time because now I know it's just like part of it. It's normal. It's like, and that's been helpful. And now that I've seen it play out, unfortunately, many times, like I know what to say because it's so normal. It happened the same thing to me. I know to ask about how your family dynamics has shifted. I know to ask about your pregnant friend because I know you have a pregnant friend because everybody has a pregnant friend. I know your parents are probably not showing up for you in the way you need because no one's parents are showing up for them in the way they need. So I think that with that, like, once you see it and you kind of go through the process 3 or 4 times, you're like, oh, at the time it felt like this nebulous groping around the dark, but now it's like, okay, I know where everything is in the room. It's just like, when are you getting to that part? Because it's coming.
Yeah.
I just don't know if it's going to come, next year or if it's going to come next week, but I guarantee it.
Yeah.
It's also like healing when you're talking to someone and you're saying the things to them. You're almost saying them to yourself too, right? Because you guys went through the same losses. So you're saying like, it's okay to feel this way. It's okay that you blew up at your whatever and you said something you shouldn't have said. Like, it's normal. That's what we all do. And then you're like, oh, well, I guess that's true to me too,
Mm-hmm. There's another part that I think has been really meaningful for me too, which is that I think when I make a friend, Aiden makes a friend. And every person that I get to talk about with Aiden is one more person that knows him and loves him and cares about him and will remember him and will remember when he died and will remember, like, to me, that is such a healing. That's so healing. And that might be the only way for him to be known and to create space in the world. Like by giving to people, I'm also bringing Aiden back into the world. Like his spirit continues to live in the world. And in the flip side, I get to know Michal. Like I get to know your baby because through you, I know her. And to me, that adds a lot of value. Like it's very healing for me to get to know other people's babies and dead babies, alive babies. But alive babies actually do. I will add to say about alive babies, like Michal had a younger brother now, your little baby. And I cried when I held him for the first time. When I held my daughter for the first time, I mean, I was not, it was like not the moment.
You were not on Earth.
Yeah.
It was complicated.
Yeah.
But Marnina's son was not complicated for me at all. It was just like pure joy that I could like soak in every minute and love every single second and just want to look at him and have him near me and love on him because I felt like we'd both worked so hard to bring him into this world. I just felt like I was a part of it, but it was even easier because I didn't have to get up with him at night and I wasn't traumatized by him. So it was like
You're describing how I feel about your daughter.
Yeah, I get to like reap all the benefits of it without any of the hardship. And it brings me so much nachas, which is like a Yiddish phrase. I don't even know what it means. It brings me like joy.
How do you spell that?
Nachas. What does Google say? I don't even know.
Fulfillment.
Fulfillment?
Google says gratification.
Okay.
Sure.
Pride or gratification, especially at the achievements of one's children.
Yes.
That's right.
It's all about kids.
It's all about the kids.
It is.
Yeah, so I think that it definitely brings me a lot of gratitude and fulfillment. Just to know him and to watch him and to see him in a way that my daughter can't because it's
complicated.
I mean, she does in other ways, but it's not so simple. It's more complicated. I see her loss in everything. So it's been so healing for me to see him and to like watch you parent him. And that's something I only got because of that relationship, in my life.
I think that's so true though about, getting to know our children that are, that have passed. I feel like Quinn and Aiden are very real to me. even though I've never spoken to Alina before, um, except when I message you. Like sometimes I forget. I'm really bad at names, but like I'm pretty good at like dead baby names. You know what I mean?
Oh my
Like,
God, me too.
When I find out their names, I put it in their phone. So right now it says Marnina, Michal's mom, Alina, Quinn's mom. That way I'll never forget because
smart.
it's on there. That's my trick.
Yeah.
Well, okay, I have 2 questions, and then I just want to be mindful of time, but I have 2 questions. Question number 1, I had said to you, like, I was concerned because I had a baby a week or 2 after Michal died. So in the end, did that impact you? Like, did that change the dynamic? What would you say to other people who, like, they want to reach out, but they just had their rainbow baby? Like, what was your thought process about that? And then the second thing I want to say is like, okay, and then you found out I had a podcast. So and I don't think I definitely didn't say it in the beginning. Like, I don't think I just so I just want to bring that up because it's a little unusual and I never know what to say. Am I supposed to tell people?
I struggle with that too, because like I would recommend this podcast to anyone who is losing.
Like, I can't recommend my own podcast. It's very weird.
It feels a little weird to be like, here's some resources for lost parents. Number 1, my podcast. Well, like I've done that before. I'm like, I know this is weird.
I don't know. I'll just say I heard on a podcast and I won't even say my podcast. I don't know what to do. So that's why I'm asking Marnina. Okay, both those questions.
Okay, to your first question, it's interesting that you bring that up because I actually had a friend who lives down the street who I knew from before who had a baby that passed away within a few hours of birth. Really tragic story. She was actually born in the same hospital that Michal was born. So like very connected, and she had died 4 or 5 years beforehand. And I knew this woman before Michal passed away, and we talked about her daughter, and I was like really impressed by how she shared everything. And she was pregnant at the same time as me with her daughter. And she actually came like right after Michal died to like the quasi Shiva that I had. And she, was talking a lot and was like very present. And then she had her baby, and I have not like really been able to interact with her much. I don't think it was because she had a baby. I think it's because the way she reacted after she had a baby. I think she felt like she had to pull away. And it could be because the proximity. We live down the street, and maybe she felt like, oh, I don't want to trigger her. I know it's going to be triggering. I don't want her to see me. And so then it turned into, I'm not going to reach out. I'm not going to whatever. But after she had her baby, she really did not reach out anymore. And I wasn't going to reach out. That wasn't going to be, I wasn't going to be me. And I figured that would happen to you too, Judith. I figured like, oh, she has her baby. And I was actually happy for you, which was unusual because I wasn't really happy for people, but you had lost Aiden a year ago. And I was so happy that I was so grateful that you had your daughter, but still I was like, okay, she had her daughter. So like, that's going to be it. She's not going to have, the bandwidth or not going to want to talk to me anymore. I think it's about showing up. I think if this other person had shown up in the way that you showed up or the way I show up for other people, again, it has to be the right fit. But when you show up, I think that's really what it is at the end of the day.
I think the proximity is key too. Cause like I know like Judith and I, like with your daughter, like I'm able to be so joyful with her because like it feels very simple because she's not like, especially when she was really, really little. Now she's like a regular human child. But when she was a baby and Quinn's age and all of that, like it was very easy for me to be like, she's a triggering age. Can I not see pictures of her until she's a little bit older? And you were like, it was so easy for you to do that. Whereas that's really hard when you live down the street from somebody.
That's true.
But I'll also add that I made a huge conscious effort not to talk about her ever.
Yes.
I don't think I spoke about her until like maybe, I don't know, at some point, I'm sure I've mentioned her, but like I never, ever, ever spoke about her. I never even like really said her name. I would like refer to her, but I would never talk about her because you know why? Because you are not my parenting a live baby friend. You are my parenting a dead baby friend. So there's nothing to really talk about. You don't care if she walked today. You don't care what her first, you don't care. And I don't really care to talk about it. So I don't think what I would say to other people is like, you can have a friendship that exists outside of your alive children. You can have a friendship that exists on your dead children. And that's a beautiful and meaningful and valuable friendship too. Just because you have other things going on, maybe when they're down the block, it's a little more complicated, maybe. But I have always felt like if you're humble and you're in it with them and you're like bearing witness, I will easily see past your live children because I feel like you're in it with me.
Yeah.
100%. For me, the challenges I have are people who have live children and they don't see Aiden, and they, I have a lot more difficulty with people who have live children who want to only talk about their live children or want to talk about their, like, I'm just not that person for you. So I would agree with you that it's much more about what the attitude is you coming into the relationship than like whether or not you have other children. And you have alive children.
It's true.
That's the thing. Like, you have alive children, and we don't really talk about them very much either,
Right. We talk about Aiden, we talk about Michal.
We talk about Aiden, we talk about Michal, we talk about our parents, we talk about our spouses.
Yeah.
But we don't really talk, I don't really know what 10-year-olds do, and I probably wouldn't ask.
But I think that's so key. I think like at the beginning, you really were very mindful, and that was something I never had to worry about with you. And then I think you took the cues from me. So when I would started being comfortable with it, and I would ask you questions about your daughter, and she's not so triggering for me at this point, really at all. Yeah. Then, things shifted and you were able to kind of go with it.
And what about the podcast? Should I have brought that up? How am I supposed to talk about this? It feels very weird.
You like just mentioned it in passing.
Maybe that's the way I did it. I don't know. And then you were like, "Oh, I'll listen."
Yeah, I listened right away and I loved it right away. And you should have told me earlier.
You know what else? This is another way I've brought it up. I'll tell people you should make a new Instagram account. Make an Instagram account that's not about make an Instagram that's like for your loss space. And then they'll say like, "Do you have one?" I'll be like, "I do have one, but I'm just letting you know if you want to follow me, it is a podcast account."
That's how it happens. I told you I made you an account and you're like, "That's great." And then you told me about the podcast. I'm pretty sure that's how it happened.
And then I was like, "You can follow my account, but it's a podcast account." And then you're probably like, "Why is it a podcast account?" And then I'm probably like,
"Because I have a podcast."
No, but honestly, guys, like the work you have been doing has been amazing. I've listened to like almost all of your, of your podcasts. So
I appreciate that.
I was happy to learn about them, and I listened to them immediately and regularly. I'm your number one fan.
Because the thing is, I don't want to presume that somebody, first of all, is a podcast person, because many people are not podcast people. But I also don't want to presume that somebody would find our particular content helpful.
I agree.
But I also think like it could be helpful, and you're trying to fill your fucking days in the beginning. And so like we have 2 years of back episodes. Like,
yes,
if it happens to be the right thing, like I don't want to not share it with somebody just because I feel weird about, especially because it feels like self-aggrandizing or like I'm like whatever, but it's also like we don't make money from this. Like it's not like I'm getting anything out of like inviting new listeners.
I know, but I don't like it when people are like, I don't know. I don't like when people are like, it feels like they're trying to sell you on something.
Exactly. And I never wanted to come off that way.
I just don't mention it. And then I hope that at some point, like, I can they'll be like, "What's your Instagram account?"
I think that's a good way. That's a good way, Judith. I think what you did was right. You didn't mention it right away. You mentioned it within a few weeks. So that was good.
It took time. I got there eventually.
Yeah.
Well, we're just wrapping up, but Marnina, I will be in town actually next week. So I'd love to see you.
Come visit, please.
Okay. Thank you for being on this podcast, and thank you for being a wonderful friend. And I hate that our children died, but I do think that this friendship is a very teeny silver lining, not worth it. But if I had to do it,
Can I say one last thing?
Yeah.
I remember like a few months after Michal died, we were like still talking like every single day. And I was at a mutual friend's house, and she was like asking me like, "Oh, who are you messaging?" And I'm like, "Oh, Judith." And she's like, "You still talk to Judith?" I'm like, "Yeah, what do you mean? Of course I still talk to Judith." And she's like, "Yeah, but like, didn't you like already talk about, what you needed to talk about? Like, what do you still have to talk about?" And I remember being like, and I love this friend, but I remember being like, wow, that's the difference between someone who's gone through loss and someone who hasn't. Because there is no shortage and there's no end to the things that Judith and I can talk about.
It just never ends.
It's a day in, day out slog. Every single day is different. Every single hour is different.
That is so funny.
That is funny.
What is there to talk like?
She was like, "What is there to still talk about?" And
What's
I'm like,
there not to talk about?
"What isn't there to talk about? I have nothing to talk to you about." Like normal people, live children.
Well, that mutual friend of us, she has texted me and she said, like, "I don't really know what you and Marnina talk about, but I know that she really values your friendship."
Really?
That's what she has said that to me. Yeah. She'll say that on Aiden's death anniversary. She'll send me a message and she'll just be like, "I know you've really been there for me, Marnina. I'm not sure like, what you guys do, but it's been helpful."
It has been. It has been.
So I appreciate that to the friend. And I appreciate that you reached out. And, She actually might have reached out when Aiden died because I was actually more friends with her than I was friends with you, but like by
Probably.
a fraction because all these people. Okay, well, I don't know when this is going to come out, but I think that a lot of people really relate to it. I think you said some really good nuggets in there.
I hope so.
To all of our wonderful new friends, we want to hear from you. Email us at aslongasimlivingpodcast@gmail.com and follow us on Instagram at aslongasimlivingpodcast. We'll get back to you as soon as our grieving brains allow.
Yay!